Hi, I'm Cynthia Nichols, the Regional Public Engagement Specialist for the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv. Thank you for joining us today on Views from Ukraine. We'll be talking about cybersecurity. After 45 minutes, our panelists are going to go to private breakout rooms to answer questions from the media in attendance. As a reminder, the panel is being recorded, but the breakout rooms are not. All conversations are on the record. If you are in the main Zoom session, please remember to mute your microphone and turn off your cameras. And now, I'll hand it over to our moderator, Press Attaché for the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, Dan Langenkamp. Dan?
Good evening, everybody. The buildup of more than 100,000 Russian troops
Recording in progress.
On Ukraine's borders is a deeply concerning threat that has captured the world's attention. Less attention has been paid to something that has the potential to be no less destabilizing and destructive, the cyber threat, the potential for an attack that could shut down Ukraine's critical infrastructure and other critical infrastructure and capabilities in Ukraine. How bad is that threat? Does Russia have that capability? And what can be done about it? Today we'll be speaking with two experts in the field, Volodymyr Tkach, an associate professor at the Sikorsky Kyiv Polytechnic Institute, and Alexandra Tsekhanovska, the head of hybrid warfare, the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group at the Ukraine Crisis Media Center. We will get right to it. Our first question is, how real is the threat of a cyber attack in Ukraine? Volodymyr, how about over to you first?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Before I start, thank you for having me here. It's very exciting. So, well, first, it's not just a real threat. We are now under the permanent pressure from the attackers from well-known country. And we don't have to think that the attack 13, which has happened recently, is something we can talk about as it is in the past. It's not finished yet. And we have got the new step of this attack on February 1st. I mean, the leak from the Ministry for Communities and Territories Development of Ukraine. But speaking about threats, I would mention the fact that the most important part in predicting anything is not the piece of knowledge that we have, but rather the one that we don't. In other words, we just know about attacks that happened in the past, but we definitely don't know where these attacks led us to, and we don't know where these attacks led attackers to, and which bombs they may have planted somewhere in a shadow of these loud and noisy discussions and rumors of the most recent attack. So,
Or what what assets in Ukraine are vulnerable? Do you think?
well, definitely Ukraine is vulnerable. Well, but first of all, it's not alone. Ukraine is not alone who is vulnerable. And speaking about the assets, we have to understand that the primarily target for any cyber war is actually the critical infrastructure. And we have a lot of critical infrastructure that is not highly protected, I would say so.
In power supplies, for example, or do you
Yeah.
mean transportation networks, or what
Exactly.
kind of things are we talking about?
All the things you just listed. So it's power grids, it's transportation, telecommunications. It can be literally anything. The banking sector, financial sector in general, and specific governmental institutions and their services.
Thank you very much. So, Alexandra, why is Ukraine so vulnerable, do you think?
Well, first of all, because cyber attacks against Ukraine tend to be a part of the bigger picture, and it's important for us to remember that. First, if we take a look back, we will see that major cyber attacks against Ukraine attributed to Russian Federation have taken place since 2014. So it has been consistently used as a part of a broader hybrid aggression and hybrid influence to undermine Ukraine's defense capabilities, sow panic and discord, undermine trust towards governments. Also, one very important thing that also contributes to our weaknesses, and I agree with Volodymyr pretty much, everyone has weaknesses, but our situation is a little bit special because in a cyber field, as well as in other fields, Ukraine is often used as a testing ground for Russian Federation. So very often the attacks that come from Russia are first to happen in Ukraine. And it means we don't always have a precedence or action protocol or algorithm to deal with this new emerging problem specifically. And that is also a big challenge.
Could they, Volodymyr, also attack the Ukrainian armed forces themselves in this? Is this just civilian assets that we're talking about, or could it also be security assets?
Well, we do not fully understand which scenario Russians will choose. Well, it can be either of these. It can be a full military invasion. In this case, cyber scene will have just a supporting meaning to support invasion, to, like I said, disrupt existing possibilities and capabilities to defend. I mean, the railway communication, transportation systems, maybe energy systems or telecommunication to see the panic. Well, in other cases, in the case of a long-term pressure scenario, we will probably witness multiple narrow-aimed attacks, and the goal here is to terrify people and discredit our officials and the state institutions, and like I said, to see the panic and to push some narratives forward and try to get some maybe political benefits.
So we know that Russia has done attacks on Ukraine before. Clearly, there have been attacks that have taken place elsewhere in the world. Could you both give us a sense of what has happened in the past, in Ukraine in particular, in both the recent past and further back?
Well, yeah, there's as per now, there's a lot of precedents for cyber attacks in Ukraine. We may start from December 2015, the Black Energy attack. And that attack has caused a blackout for over 30 stations or substations for over 6 hours. And this attack was not specifically targeted to Prikarpatia Oblenergo, but also to Chernivtsi Oblenergo and Kyiv Oblenergo.
Let me just repeat that for our audience. So this was in Prikarpatia in the Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast. Is that correct? It's in western Ukraine.
Yeah, but they actually have attacked 3 different Oblenergos, one on the west, one on the center of the country, and then one Kyiv Oblenergo is like north.
And that attack shut off power for several 100,000 people. Is that correct?
Yes, over 200,000 people.
And there's the attack, the Not Plecha attack. Is that correct? Could you tell us about that one?
Would you please repeat?
The Pletya attack and the
Petya.
not Pletya attacks.
Yeah, that was I cannot say interesting, yeah, but still, it was quite interesting evidence of ransomware that was discovered in 2016, and this malware targeted Microsoft Windows-based system, in fact, in the master boot record, to execute a payload and encrypt the hard drives file system and prevent Windows from booting. And then subsequently demands that the user make a payment in Bitcoin to regain access to the system. So this malware had infected millions of people during its first year of its release.
I see, and so that attack is ascribed to the Russian Federation. Is that correct?
If I may
Yeah.
interject here, I'd like to say that we don't really know, it hasn't been fully established who is a perpetrator behind the attack, but most of experts, including me, for example, suggest that it's GRU, the intelligence unit, Russian Federation. However, what is interesting is that attack itself that later did an incredible amount of damage, not just to Ukrainian institutions, but also infected a lot of computers and software abroad. So it emerged in Ukraine, and I followed Russian propaganda closely at the time, and I do remember that they made a very substantial effort to portray this as a malign Ukrainian pattern of behavior towards the Western countries. So they tried to put the blame on Ukraine, which is something they often do at GRU and other units involved in cyber, which is actually a different topic. We can talk about it now, or we can discuss it later.
There's often not only is there an attempt to cloak these efforts and make them look like they're done by ransomware firms, but there's also a simultaneous disinformation effort that tries to make them look like something other than what they are. That's what you're saying, correct?
Absolutely. And we have also seen this in regard to the most recent attack that took place on January 14 that targeted more than 70 government websites and the DIA application, which stores a lot of personal data for regular Ukrainians. And it wasn't an attack on critical infrastructure such as banking system or cutting off electro-energy supply, but it was accompanied to a very substantial extent by information operations that targeted bilateral relations of Ukraine with other countries, and we can delve into that, but that also contributed a lot to the spread of panic combined with all the other things that are going on. Military buildup on the border, the messages about the false mine lane in schools all over Ukraine, that doesn't contribute to stability. And combined with the threatening message that we have hacked your personal data of your citizens, and it's now allegedly available for sale all over the darknet, it was not taken well.
Talk about this one a little bit more. January 14, in the middle of the night, over 70 government websites were taken over. What else happened in that takeover? Was just this a takeover of websites with messaging put out, or was there something more going on?
Well, if I may, this attack actually has, we count now 3 main steps. And the first was long before the website's deface. As per investigation and the leaked data analysis, we may say that this leakage has happened in November 2021. And some databases dumps even claim to be made in June the same year, 2021. Then second step is what we actually know as the attack. It has happened on January 13, 14, in the midnight. In order to modify the content of web pages, on January 14, attackers using the Tor browser, using Tor networks, gained access to the control panels of websites of a number of organizations, I mean governmental organizations. And according to the official statement of CERT UA, there are no signs of brute force or trying to guess the authentication data. And also investigation of compromised systems revealed suspicious activity using legitimate accounts. So what does this mean? We cannot say right now, but let's wait for some more official information.
Do we
And then, sorry, I'm just finishing. Finally, the third step, it is a leakage advertising itself, and it has appeared on the January 22nd. So some person advertised it to sell for $15,000, which is not very high price for this amount of data. And these data claim to be the data from DIA system, about 700 gigabytes of sensitive personal data of regular users of this service. And then later on February 1st, this is why I'm saying that this attack is still ongoing. So on the February 1st, we have a new leakage from the Ministry of Communities and Territories Development of Ukraine. And overall, we have 1.5 terabytes of personal data leaked out. And we assume that this is going to be used in the future for the future attacks.
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, there was not only the takeover of those sites, but there was the theft of 1.5 terabytes, which is a huge amount of information, personal data of Ukrainian citizens that is now basically for sale on the dark web that can be used for some malign purpose. What could that purpose be? Volodymyr or Alexandra?
I'll start and then I'll transfer the floor over to Vladimir. The possibilities are endless, actually, and perpetrators could get access to personal data and information such as the questions that are asked for access to our emails or to our accounts, for example, on banking platforms. And that would enable them to get further access to, for example, our emails, or if we talk about finance, even to our personal cabinets online for the banks, that would enable them, for example, to take loans. And this actually has some precedent in Ukraine, unfortunately. And that would actually have devastating results. But it is just one sample of what could have happened. And I'm sure Volodymyr can take from here and maybe tell us more about the potential results.
Basically, with this information, steal the identities of Ukrainian citizens. Okay, yeah, Volodymyr?
Yeah, well, actually, it's not that much to complement. Actually, the problem is that as the attackers can now have all this personal information, they can use it for spear phishing, and they can, make a carpet bombing to find out as many entry points as they can. So and then build some supply chain for finding the entrance to their targets.
Attack. Do you think it was actually to get at the personal data? It sounds like that an attack like that, which put information on the websites of all these institutions, also seemed to be sending a message to Ukraine that someone else is in control. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I would leave it to comment for the officials, but my personal opinion is that it was just pretty much a demonstration of the power rather than using it. But we still do not know what can be actually planted deep inside of our official systems.
So then,
yeah,
this is a pretty scary then prospect if you have a foreign power that has that much control. No? Go ahead.
Well, like I said, I would better leave it for commenting from the officials because they have all this information. We're just specialists, but not having this official information.
I very much agree that it can be perceived as sending a message that we are in control and we are free to do everything that we want to do. But there also was, if we talk about the messages that were displayed on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, a very specific different message. And it was a text written in three languages, Ukrainian, Russian, and Polish. And Polish experts have confirmed that the Polish part was not written by a native speaker, so someone pretending to be Polish did that. And this text, I remind, it was displayed at the website website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, appealed strongly to problematic and sensitive issues, mostly historical ones, that Poland and Ukraine have and that we are trying to deal with. So also this can be seen as an attempt to undermine bilateral relations between Poland and Ukraine. When we talk about the Kremlin, we always have to remember that they rarely have just one goal for what they are doing. And it also stands true for cyber attacks. They don't just spread panic, they also try to learn our vulnerabilities. They may leave some malware that they can use later because there is historical precedence for that, etc., etc. So we have a lot of different goals behind one action usually.
So let me ask, what makes Ukraine vulnerable? Just going back to that question, is this as a result of unupdated software? Is it a result of already previously stolen passwords? Is Ukraine unique in any way related to what makes it vulnerable?
Well, I wouldn't say that Ukraine is unique in this case, but well, there are some specific issues that we have here in Ukraine. So, well, I would say, first of all, and it's just a very common fact that among the important aspects of Ukraine's vulnerability is that we have quite developed digital infrastructure, and we have an internet connection at a very low price, at a very high speed, and it's affordable to anyone, and so internet is widely used. And lay this factor onto another one. We have an extremely low awareness of cybersecurity threats and cyber hygiene criticality. And this can, like I said, lead to carpet bombing, if you will, sending out the spam and getting access to anywhere we can get they can get an access. And also, there is one of the most, or maybe the most vulnerability factor, that our critical infrastructure security parameters depend on and highly depend on the financing from the budget. And as a country in war, we cannot really afford its improvement to 100% of what is needed. And moreover, these improvements and security investments should be based on a risk assessment to address more relevant security issues, which is not always.
So let's move on then to the subject generally of what Ukraine can do about it, what Ukraine is doing about it. Volodymyr, do you have any insight into what the Ukrainian government is doing to protect itself, or is it working with other countries to protect itself?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an insight. It's like very quite public information. Well, do we do something adequate to are our efforts adequate? Well, yes and no. Yes, they are adequate to what we had in the past, but is this enough for future challenges? Not sure, but as you mentioned, we have a support from our Western partners and some quite useful and relevant initiative. And by the way, recently, head of the State Service of Special Communication and Information Protection of Ukraine, Yuri Shigel, he initiated the law changes that are aimed to create and support the bug bounty procedure, which is security-related bug hunting for those who don't know this. And another law changes are now being prepared to help establishing the cooperation of state officials with the private sector on cybersecurity issues, which is highly critically important right now.
I see.
Yeah,
okay.
and if we talk about important things that we still have to do, in my personal opinion, we need more cooperation between different bodies that are responsible for cybersecurity in Ukraine. Because right now, the key body to go to would be the National Defense and Security Council, but we also have cyber police, for example, and we also have security service of Ukraine, and we need to have better coordination. Each body has to understand who is responsible for what, and have clear and practical algorithms for working in case of unpleasant developments. I don't feel like we have enough of that now.
Do you feel that there is an increasing awareness of this threat? Is Ukraine doing something about it so far? I mean, more than at least 7 or 8 years ago when these first attacks happened?
I think that we definitely have learned a lot, and I also expect that a lot of effort on behalf of the government and security services goes unnoticed because they pursue sort of a do don't tell approach, and often we learn that, for example, there was an attempted cyber attack or even series of those much later than the events actually took place. I think that partially I can agree with this approach because it saves us from a lot of panic and anxiety as society. But as a communications expert, I would definitely love to hear more about specific steps that our government is doing to improve the situation, because we are aware of the danger, but we should know that the government is doing something. I understand that there are sensitive details that cannot be shared for security reasons, but there is definitely a way to communicate better.
For those listening, there is the United States has spent about $80 million since 2014 helping Ukraine bolster its cyber defenses. About $40 million of that is on the civilian side, and I think about $30 million is from the Defense Department side in the United States. Volodymyr, let me ask you, I mean, are Ukrainians, Alexander was getting towards the issue of, the Ukrainian public and their awareness and their preparation. Do you think the Ukrainian population is becoming more aware of this threat and are beginning to take their own efforts to protect their own accounts and their own data?
Well, it's very difficult to answer this question technically because I cannot, respond for the whole population. But we do our best to actually provide the services, the teaching services for organizations, for people to increase this cybersecurity awareness. But I would actually wanted to get back just for a few seconds to the previous issue about what Ukraine has to do, and we must pay more attention not to like recoveries from attacks or to defending from them, but rather to implementing the responsibility for the security aspect of any business to prevent them, because we have a lot of cybersecurity related organizations. In a way it's good and they must exist, but we have to lay more responsibility to our companies, especially to those who provide software and specific services for the state, because you cannot heal the plague by just having doctors wash their hands or having special centralized organizations that check how clean your hands are. You have to make it a habit, a good habit, and then it works.
I see. So, and what is going to happen? How are Ukrainians going to react if and when there is a cyber attack? They have some experience, obviously, from dealing with attacks in the past. The Ukrainians are a resilient people. How do you think they'll react, Alexandra?
Well, the exact reaction would definitely be defined by what exactly the kind of attack we are speaking, and by the fact whether this is a standalone attack or it is combined with something. Sure, Ukrainians have a lot of experiences with the absence of energy supply for several hours due to cyber attacks, and it usually takes authorities up to approximately 6 hours to fix this and get the energy for people back. But in case this is combined with, let's say, attack on telecommunication system, it obviously makes fixing the situation way more difficult. However, and I would like to stress it, that this is a hypothetical scenario, and it is important for us to understand that, yes, of course, it would be much more difficult to deal with the situation in case we are attacked on several fronts, even on several cyber fronts, and we have to be prepared for that. But we also have to ask ourselves, does the Russian Federation actually have the resources on its hands to, carry out several attacks at once? We shouldn't think of them as omnipotent. Yes, of course, we have to prepare for the worst, but we definitely shouldn't panic. And I frankly don't think that a lot of Ukrainians would indeed panic. There is a very important difference. We like to complain about things, but we are not so easily scared.
Mm-hmm. And Volodymyr, what do you think? How will Ukrainians react if they find that their electricity gas and telephones and internet are shut off?
Well, I agree to what Alexandra said, because Ukrainians really get used to complaining, but they are pretty much optimistic on everything that is happening. And look at the COVID-19 response. Well, they protect themselves still, but they're smiley. They're trying to behave normally and live their normal lives. And I think it's very important and crucial to understand what kind of attack is going to be performed by Russians. But as we now may see on this attack, the most recent one, like we recovered pretty fast, and as officials say that, let's say we're 95 to 100% recovery is done, and it's quite fast. And the recovery from the attacks to power grids took like several hours. It's much faster. Yeah, but like I said, it was just pretty much a demonstration of the power rather than using it. So we have to definitely to get ready for new attacks to follow, and not just on the websites.
Yes,
Yep,
and
go ahead.
if I just may, if we find ourselves in a situation where, for example, we are out of electricity for some time, I give you my word that a lot of Ukrainians will not even be aware that this is a result of a cyber attack. They will just grumble about how our electric energy supply is not really working that good, and how our government is to blame. This is funny to an extent, I understand, but this also shows first the very low level of cyber hygiene that Volodymyr was talking about. Approximately 50% of Ukrainians have either basic or even below basic level of skills when it comes to cybersecurity. At least this was the data in 2019 and 2020. And
By that, when you
also
say skills of cybersecurity, what kind of skills are we talking about?
Well, I guess everybody knows what kind of the password is most popular all over the world, and also in Ukraine. It's QWERTY, it's 1234, that kind of stuff. And it's such a big problem for Ukrainians. They are very susceptible to phishing, and this phishing in emails, for example, it doesn't even have to look very sophisticated, because again, it is very difficult for people to distinguish which letter is safe and which one should not be opened. We all know that in case you receive an email from a suspicious account, you shouldn't click on the links, you shouldn't download any extensions. People still do that, and they do that very often. It's just in a nutshell.
Yeah, I can compliment. I totally agree. And like Alexandra mentioned, the most sophisticated attacks are often performed on a social engineering stake, like the same phishing. People just get used to click into everything, and you get a message to your inbox. You click on the link in a social media to figure out what kind of animal you are, and this is it. You're compromised, and then you lose your email box, social networks account, and so on, and maybe even banking account. The problem is that we sometimes are not even aware of this compromise. So you just click and then forget. If an attacker doesn't identify himself, you may remain compromised for a very long period of time. And this will be exploited then later when needed on a D-Day and a T time.
So, there's this question about whether a cyber attack that takes place could be considered aggression against Ukraine. What do you say to that?
Well, I think it's definitely a tool of aggression. It's just one of the instruments in a very broad and sophisticated toolbox that the Kremlin uses against Ukraine. Again, I'd like to say one more time that vast and destructive cyber attacks against Ukraine started since 2014 with the start of Russian aggression against Ukraine. It's a tool, and I don't see much sense in treating it as a standalone problem. For us to be really efficient and resilient in dealing with this and other problems, we have to understand that this is a part of the bigger picture.
And that bigger picture is that Ukraine stands as what against Russia? What are you saying? What is the bigger picture there?
Well, I think this is a rather philosophical question and not really the one corresponding to cybersecurity. Yeah, but basically, sovereign, independent, and democratic Ukraine is an existential threat for the Russian Federation the way it is now. The idea of free Ukraine gives Russians the wrong idea that they maybe are also deserving of democracy in their country, and it also has a lot to do with, the overall perception of Ukraine as a historical mistake, to quote Russian propaganda. The idea of a sovereign standalone Ukraine that chooses European Union and NATO against staying along with Russia is just inconceivable for the current Russian elites. And so for bringing us back home, as they think, everything works. This is the key reason, existential reason behind what started in 2014 and what also includes cyber attacks that we are talking about today.
Volodymyr, do you agree with that? Is it because Ukraine stands as a democratic country, one that provides a different model of governance to the one in Russia? Is that the reason that Ukraine stands as the target for so much of this hybrid aggression?
Yeah, totally. It's no secret that even Putin claimed that that was the most geopolitical catastrophe when the USSR was broken apart. Well, Ukraine is a good evidence of how this can be, how Russia can be, and this is why, as they claim us to be brothers, they don't want to see Ukraine strong and powerful, the pro-European, pro-American, pro-NATO country. And this is, like Alexandra said, this is an existential threat to those who choose the model that they use now, the model of being Russia.
In the eyes of the Russian Federation, if I may, Ukraine can only be with Russia. There is this very popular narrative that Russian aggression is driven by the expansion of NATO, and this is just not true, because before pro-Russian President Yanukovych was deposed, Ukraine was a neutral country. It did not have, inscribed in the constitution the way we do now that we aim to join NATO. We were a neutral country, and that didn't save us. So in the eyes of the Russian Federation, as it is now, Ukraine can only exist as a Russian satellite. Either this or we don't exist at all.
Thank you for that, Alexandra and Volodymyr. This has been a fascinating discussion. We're going to wrap up now and let you speak to our participants directly in breakout rooms. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. To Views from Ukraine. We will continue in breakout rooms. I'm Dan Langenkamp, the press attaché. Thanks for joining us.